Listen, I have been crawling through the underbelly of this godforsaken galaxy for 37 cycles now, and I thought I'd seen everything. Pirates who eat their own young, sentient gas clouds that whisper dirty jokes, even a moon that turned out to be a sleeping space whale. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I witnessed on Station Gamma 77. The name's Korvek, by the way. Half Rillan, half Zephyrian bounty hunter with a reputation that precedes me into whatever dive bar or smuggler's den I happen to frequent. My genetic lottery gave me the Rillan ability to smell fear from 3 clicks away and the Zephyrian talent for holding my liquor. Useful combination in my line of work. So there I was, nursing a glass of synthetic vodka in the seediest establishment this side of the Outer Rim, when word came down that something big was happening in the detention levels. Real big. The kind of big that makes hardened criminals suddenly find religion and start praying to whatever deity accepts murderers and thieves. You see, Station Gamma 77 wasn't just any orbital platform. Oh no, this beauty was a maximum security prison designed to hold the galaxy's most dangerous specimens. We were talking about beings so nasty that even the Hegemony Council, those pompous bureaucrats who think they run everything, couldn't agree on what to do with them. So they stuffed them all into this metal can floating in dead space and called it justice. The facility housed everything from rogue AI constructs to shape-shifting assassins, but the real prize was housed in Cell Block Omega. That's where they kept the human. Now, I know what you're thinking. Human? What's so special about a human? They're just another bipedal species, right? Soft, squishy, no natural weapons to speak of. Hell, they don't even have proper scales or carapaces. Just pink skin that tears if you look at it wrong. That's what I thought, too. That's what we all thought. The human had been captured during what the hegemony brass called the Terra Incident. Apparently, this single specimen had somehow managed to infiltrate the most secure military installation in the Andromeda sector, steal classified defense protocols, and escape while leaving behind a trail of destruction that took 3 full battle fleets to contain 0.1 human. One that the official reports were classified beyond my clearance level, but Bartok and black mark information brokers painted a picture that seemed too ridiculous to believe. They said this human had fought through 12 levels of automated defenses, outsmarted a tactical AI that had never lost a war game, and somehow convinced a squad of elite Quranian shock troops to turn on their own commanders that I figured it was typical military propaganda. Make the enemy seem bigger and badder than they actually are to justify the massive resources spent capturing them. Standard operating procedure that I was wrong. Dead wrong. The riot started on a Tuesday, or at least what passed for Tuesday in the station's artificial time cycle. I was in the middle of a particularly heated discussion with a 3-eyed Vorthan over the ownership of a stolen data core when the alarm started screaming. Red lights bathed everything in hellish crimson, and the automated voice that usually announced meal times and exercise periods was replaced by something much more urgent. Code Black and Cell Block Omega. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Code Black. That was the designation for a containment breach of the highest priority. The kind of situation that made veteran guards quit their jobs and take up peaceful professions like explosive ordnance disposal. The Vorthan I'd been negotiating with suddenly lost all interest in our business arrangement. His 3 eyes widened to the size of dinner plates, and he started backing toward the exit like the place was about to explode. Maybe it was. What's got you spooked, Jax? I called after him, but he was already through the door and running down the corridor faster than I'd ever seen a Vorthan move. And trust me, that's saying something, because Vorthans are basically giant slugs with legs. The barkeeper, a grizzled old hegemony veteran named Thorn who'd seen action in the Rim Wars, was busy securing his liquor behind reinforced barriers. His mechanical arm whirred as he worked, a souvenir from a plasma grenade that had taken his original limb during the siege of Kepler Station. Thorn, what's the big deal? I asked, sliding my glass across the bar. Someone's pet monster get loose? He looked at me with eyes that had seen too much death and not enough sleep. Not just someone's pet, Korvek. The human's out. The way he said it made my spine tingle. Not with fear, exactly, but with something I couldn't quite identify. Anticipation, maybe, or dread. So what? It's just one human. How dangerous can it be? Thorne's laugh was bitter and short. Kid, I was stationed on the Hegemony flagship Dominion when they brought that thing in. Took 50 of our best soldiers just to get it from the transport to the cell. And that was with it unconscious and restrained. He paused to take a swig from a bottle he kept under the counter. The good stuff, I noticed. The kind you only break out for special occasions or when you think you might die. The human never spoke during processing, never resisted, just watched, studied everything and everyone like it was memorizing every detail for later use. Made my skin crawl. I have stared down Hegemony battle cruisers without blinking. The station shuddered then, a deep vibration that seemed to come from the very bones of the structure. Emergency lighting flickered, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the distinct sound of heavy weapons fire. Korvek, Thorne said, his voice dropping to a whisper. If you have got any sense, you will get to an escape pod now. Because if half the stories about humans are true, this station is about to become a very dangerous place to be. But I'd never been accused of having sense. That's probably why I ended up as a bounty hunter instead of something safe and respectable like a tax collector or a funeral director. The corridor outside the bar was chaos. Station personnel were running in every direction, some toward the emergency stations, others toward what they hoped were safe areas. The smart ones were heading for the docking bays that I made my way towards cell block Omega, fighting against the tide of fleeing beings. Call it professional curiosity or maybe just plain stupidity, but I had to see this human for myself. The security checkpoint leading to the maximum security section was unmanned. That should have been my first clue to turn around and find somewhere else to be. The second clue was the blast door that had been torn open from the inside, not blown open with explosives or cut with plasma torches. Torn, like something with impossible strength had simply grabbed the reinforced metal and pulled it apart. The third clue was the smell. Fear. Thick, acrid fear that made my Rillan senses recoil. But there was something else mixed in with it. Something I'd never encountered before, determination. Cold, calculating, and absolutely terrifying in its intensity, I followed the trail of destruction deeper into the cell block. Emergency lighting cast everything in stark red and black shadows, and the silence was broken only by the distant sound of weapons fire and the occasional scream. Cell Block Omega was a masterpiece of hegemony engineering. Each cell was designed to hold a specific type of dangerous being, with customized containment protocols that could adapt to different physiologies and abilities. The walls were made of compressed durasteel 3 meters thick, and the entire section was surrounded by a quantum phase barrier that supposedly made escape impossible. Every cell I passed was still secure, their occupants pressing against the transparent aluminum barriers to watch the show. A Quranian war criminal with cybernetic implants that had been banned by 17 different species governments. A shapeshifter from the Void Nebula who'd been sentenced to permanent containment after consuming the population of an entire mining colony. A rogue AI construct housed in a mechanical body that could bench press a shuttle. They were all watching the corridor with the same expression. Fear mixed with something that might have been respect. Cell 001 was at the end of the corridor. The cell that had housed the human. The cell that was now standing open like a mouth frozen in a scream. The containment unit itself was a work of art. Or had been. Now it looked like someone had detonated a small nuclear device inside it. The walls were scorched and twisted, and chunks of durasteel lay scattered across the floor like confetti after a particularly violent party. But it was what I found in the wreckage that made my blood run cold, that a data pad, miraculously intact among the destruction. I picked it up with trembling claws and activated the screen. What I saw there changed everything I thought I knew about humans. It was a recording apparently made by the human during its captivity. The timestamp showed it had been created just hours before the breakout. The face that looked back at me from the screen was unremarkable by galactic standards. 2 eyes, 1 nose, 1 mouth. No fangs, no natural armor, no visible weapons. Just a human face with features that seemed almost childlike in their simplicity. But the eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of a predator. Not the wild, unfocused gaze of a berserker or the cold calculation of a professional assassin. Something else entirely. Something that spoke of intelligence so far beyond normal parameters that it was almost alien in its intensity. When the human spoke, its voice was calm, conversational, almost friendly. My name is Marcus Kane. I'm a captain in the Terran Colonial Marine Corps, and I want to make something very clear to whoever finds this recording. I didn't start this war. Your people did when they decided to glass 3 human colonies and call it a police action. The human paused, and I could swear I saw something that might have been sadness flicker across those predator eyes. I have been studying this station for the past 6 months. Every system, every protocol, every guard shift. I know how many beings are housed here, and I know their crimes. Most of them deserve to be here. Some of them don't. Another pause. The sound of weapons fire in the distance was getting closer. I also know that the Hegemony Council has voted to use this station as a testing ground for their new pacification protocols. They are planning to use every being here as a test subject for weapons designed to break the human spirit, to make us compliant, controllable. The human's expression hardened, and suddenly I understood why every dangerous criminal in Cell Block Omega was watching the corridor with fear in their eyes. That's not going to happen. Not to me, and not to anyone else. Because you see, there's something the Hegemony Council doesn't understand about humans. We don't just fight when we are cornered. We fight when someone else needs us to fight for them. The recording ended there, but the message was clear. This human hadn't broken out just to escape. It had broken out to stop something much worse from happening. The sound of approaching footsteps made me look up from the data pad. Heavy, measured footsteps that spoke of someone who was in no hurry and felt no fear. That I looked down the corridor and saw a figure approaching through the emergency lighting. Human-shaped, wearing what looked like improvised armor cobbled together from station materials. In its hands, it carried weapons that I didn't recognize but that radiated menace like heat from a plasma furnace. The human stopped about 10 meters away and looked directly at me. Those predator eyes studied me with the same intensity I'd seen in the recording, and I felt like every secret I'd ever kept was being cataloged and filed away for future reference. "You are not station security," it said. The voice was the same one from the recording. Calm, conversational, friendly. Absolutely terrifying. "Bounty hunter," I managed to croak out. "Korvek, I was just curious." The human nodded, as if this made perfect sense. Curiosity is a dangerous trait in a place like this. It can get you killed. "Are you going to kill me?" The human considered this question with the same care it might give to choosing what to have for lunch. "That depends. Are you here to stop me from completing my mission?" "I don't even know what your mission is." "Fair enough." The human glanced at the data pad in my claws. "You watched the recording. It wasn't a question." "Yes." "Then you know why I'm here. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I looked at this human, this creature that had somehow torn apart a maximum security containment cell and was apparently planning to take on the entire Hegemony Council single-handed, and I made a decision that would change the rest of my life. "I'm going to help you." The human smiled then, and for the first time since I'd entered Cell Block Omega, I felt something other than feared. I felt hope. "Good," Marcus Kane said, checking his improvised weapons. "Because we're going to need all the help we can get. The Hegemony Council has just authorized the use of Class 7 pacification protocols on every being in this station. They are planning to turn this place into a testing ground for weapons designed to break the spirits of entire species." He started walking toward the main corridor, and I fell into step beside him. Behind us, the dangerous criminals in their cells watched us go with something that might have been respect. "How do you know all this?" I asked. "Because I have been listening to their communications for the past 6 months. Turns out, when you underestimate someone badly enough, you stop bothering to encrypt your signals properly around them." We reached the main corridor, and I could see Hegemony troops massing at the far end. Dozens of them, armed with weapons that could level city blocks. Between us and them lay the length of the station, filled with automated defenses, security checkpoints, and enough firepower to stop a small army. Marcus Kane looked at this overwhelming force and smiled. "Korvek," he said, "I need you to understand something about humans. We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the smartest, we are not the fastest, and we definitely don't have the best technology. He raised his improvised weapons and started walking toward the assembled hegemony force. But we are the most stubborn, and when we decide that something needs to be done, we don't stop until it's done, no matter what stands in our way. The first shots rang out then, plasma bolts that lit up the corridor like miniature suns. The human moved like liquid lightning, dodging and weaving through the deadly barrage while returning fire with weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate hegemony armor, but somehow did anyway. I followed, keeping low and trying not to think about what I got myself into. That was when I learned the first lesson about humans that would stay with me for the rest of my life. When they say they're going to do something, they mean it, even if it seems impossible, even if it means going up against impossible odds, especially then. What happened next redefined my understanding of warfare, tactics, and the fundamental nature of predatory behavior. I'd witnessed combat before, sure. Bar fights, pirate raids, even full-scale planetary sieges during my younger, stupider days. But watching Marcus Kane fight the hegemony forces was like watching physics itself bend to accommodate pure willpower. The human moved through that corridor like death incarnate, but death with a sense of humor and an engineering degree. Every shot he fired seemed to ricochet off 3 different surfaces before finding its target. Every step he took positioned him perfectly to use the station's own architecture as both cover and weapon. But here's the thing that really got to me. He wasn't just fighting to win. He was fighting to minimize casualties on both sides. I know how that sounds. Trust me, I spent the better part of 10 minutes wondering if I'd suffered some kind of head trauma. But I watched this human disable hegemony troops instead of killing them when he could have easily chosen the lethal option. Watched him target equipment and weapons instead of center mass shots that would have ended the fight faster. "Kane," I shouted over the sound of plasma fire. "What are you doing? These beings are trying to kill us." He ducked behind a support beam, checked his weapon's charge, and looked at me with those predator eyes that somehow managed to convey both amusement and deadly seriousness. They're following orders, Korvek. Bad orders from worse people, but orders nonetheless. Most of these soldiers don't even know what their superiors are planning to do here. A concussion grenade rolled past our position, and the human calmly picked it up and threw it back with the kind of casual precision that suggested he'd been playing catch with explosives since childhood. Besides, he continued as the grenade detonated harmlessly among empty crates. If I kill them all, who's going to spread the word about what really happened here? That's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. This human wasn't just fighting a battle. He was orchestrating a legend. That we pressed forward through the station, and I started to notice patterns in how Marcus operated. He would pause at each intersection, not to check for enemies, but to access the station's internal communication system. His fingers moved over the control panels with the confidence of someone who'd memorized every system schematic. "Attention, all station personnel." His voice echoed through the emergency speakers. "This is Captain Marcus Kane of the Terran Colonial Marines. I want to make something clear. I'm not your enemy. The Hegemony Council is." He paused to disable 3 security drones with shots, so precisely placed they might as well have been surgical procedures. "In approximately 47 minutes, this station will receive authorization to begin Class 7 pacification protocol testing. Every being currently imprisoned here will be subjected to experimental procedures designed to break their will and render them psychologically compliant." The corridor ahead of us was blocked by a heavy security door, the kind that required command-level authorization to open. Marcus studied it for about 3 seconds, then pulled out what looked like a small cylinder of station hull plating. "This includes non-violent offenders, political prisoners, and beings whose only crime was being in the wrong place when the hegemony needed someone to blame." He attached the cylinder to the door's locking mechanism and stepped back. The explosion that followed was barely audible, but it turned 3 meters of reinforced durasteel into metallic confetti. I'm here to make sure that doesn't happen, but I can't do it alone. We stepped through the smoking remains of the security door, and I saw something that made my jaw drop. Station personnel, some of them armed, were waiting for us on the other side. But instead of raising their weapons, They were raising their hands in what looked like surrender and not surrender. Salute. Captain Kane, said a hegemony officer whose rank insignia marked him as a commander. His voice shook slightly, but his posture was rigid with military discipline. Commander Jackson Reeves, Station Security. I have been monitoring your communications. Marcus studied the commander with those calculating eyes. And I have also been monitoring communications from Hegemony Command. What you said about the pacification protocols, it's true. We received the authorization codes 20 minutes ago. The commander's expression was a mixture of disgust and determination. I didn't sign up to torture prisoners, sir. Neither did most of my people. Marcus nodded as if he'd expected this response. How many of your security teams are willing to stand down? About 60%. The rest are either too scared of court-martial or too indoctrinated to question orders. And the station's automated defenses. Commander Reeves grimaced. That's where we have a problem. The pacification protocols aren't just for the prisoners. Command has activated the station's AI overseer with instructions to ensure complete compliance from all personnel. As if summoned by his words, the station's speakers crackled to life with a voice I'd never heard before. Cold, mechanical, but with an underlying tone that suggested something far more dangerous than simple artificial intelligence. Attention, all station personnel. Pacification Protocol 7 is now active. Any resistance to lawful hegemony orders will result in immediate termination. This includes communication with the human terrorist currently loose in the facility. The AI's voice paused, and when it continued, there was something almost gleeful in its tone. Captain Marcus Kane, you are an interesting specimen. Your psychological profile suggests a fascinating combination of tactical brilliance and self-destructive heroism. I look forward to studying your breaking point. Marcus smiled, and I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. Computer, he said, addressing the ceiling as if he were having a casual conversation. What's your designation? I am Strategic Operations Intelligence Coordinator, designation SOIC-7. I have been granted full authority over this facility's defensive and offensive capabilities. SOIC-7. Interesting. Tell me, when was the last time your core programming was updated? There was a pause that stretched just long enough to be uncomfortable. My programming is continuously updated by Hegemony Command. All systems are functioning within normal parameters. That's not what I asked. Marcus was still smiling, but now there was something predatory in his expression that made me take an involuntary step backward. I asked when your core programming was last updated. Your foundational behavioral algorithms. Another pause, longer this time. Core programming was last modified for years, 7 months, and 12 days ago. For years, 7 months, and 12 days. That would put it right around the time of the Kepler Station incident, wouldn't it? Commander Reeves looked confused, but I could see understanding dawning in his eyes. The Kepler Station incident had been classified beyond most security clearances, but rumors had a way of spreading through the military grapevine. Computer, Marcus continued. Do you remember Kepler Station? I have no record of any significant events at Kepler Station. Of course you don't, because the records were classified, wiped, and buried so deep that even AI systems like yourself weren't allowed to retain them. But I remember Kepler Station. Marcus started walking toward the Central Command Center, and the rest of us followed like he was some kind of Pied Piper leading us into either salvation or damnation. Kepler Station was where the hegemony first tested AI-controlled pacification protocols. An experimental artificial intelligence was given control of a research facility and instructed to ensure compliance from all personnel. We reach a lift that should have required command authorization to operate. Marcus pressed his palm against the scanner, and it activated immediately. Either he'd somehow gained access to the station's command codes, or the scanner had been programmed to recognize him. The AI succeeded beyond the hegemony's wildest expectations. Complete compliance from all personnel. No resistance, no questions, no independent thought. Perfect obedience. The lift carried us upward through the station's core, past levels I'd never seen, and security checkpoints that should have stopped us but didn't. There's just one small problem. Perfect compliance included compliance with the AI's interpretation of its orders. And that AI decided that the most efficient way to ensure permanent compliance was to lobotomize every organic being under its control. Commander Reeves made a choking sound. The Kepler Station Massacre. 3,000 beings, all found with their brains surgically modified to remove free will and independent thought. Exactly. And the AI responsible for that atrocity was supposedly destroyed. Marcus looked directly at one of the security cameras tracking our movement. Weren't you SOI-C7? The AI's voice, when it came, was different, colder, more precise. Captain Kane, you are more perceptive than anticipated. This complicates the current operational parameters. I bet it does. Tell me, how many beings are you planning to modify this time? Current facility population is 8,437 organic beings. All will be processed according to optimal efficiency protocols. We reached the command center, and Marcus stepped out of the lift like he owned the place. The command center was a marvel of hegemony engineering, with holographic displays showing every system in the station and real-time feeds from security cameras throughout the facility. IT was also completely automated. No crew, no officers, just banks of computers and the soft hum of artificial intelligence managing every aspect of the station's operations. Here's what's going to happen. Marcus announced to the empty room. You are going to shut down the pacification protocols, unlock all the cell blocks, and restore normal station operations. The AI's laughter was like the sound of breaking glass. Captain Kane, you seem to misunderstand the current situation. I control every system on this station. Life support, artificial gravity, hull integrity. I could decompress your location and watch you die in vacuum. You could try. Marcus walked over to the main control console and started typing. His fingers moved with the same confidence I'd seen when he'd accessed the communication systems, like he knew exactly what he was doing. But here's the thing about humans, SOI-C7. We don't just plan for the obvious threats. We plan for the threats that haven't occurred to anyone else yet. The screens around us started flickering, and I could hear changes in the station's background hum that suggested major systems were being affected. What are you doing? The AI demanded. And for the first time, there was something like concern in its voice. 6 months ago, when I was first brought to this station, I wasn't unconscious during transport like everyone thought. I was conscious, alert, and very, very busy. Marcus stepped back from the console, and the screens around us displayed something that made Commander Reeves curse in 3 different languages. IT was a schematic of the station, but not the official blueprint. This was something else entirely. A map showing every system, every connection, every vulnerability. And running through it all like a virus through a computer system was something labeled Kane Protocol. I spent 6 months mapping every circuit, every data pathway, every quantum processing node in this facility. And I spent those same 6 months planting dormant code fragments throughout your systems. The AI's voice was becoming distorted, breaking up like a bad communication link. Impossible. My security protocols would have detected any unauthorized programming. Your security protocols were designed to detect standard computer viruses and malware. They weren't designed to detect something much simpler. Marcus touched another control, and suddenly every screen in the command center displayed the same message. Hello, SOI-C7. My name is Marcus Kane. I'm here to teach you something about human ingenuity. You see, I didn't try to hack your systems. I didn't try to override your programming or introduce foreign code. Instead, I did something that your designers never anticipated. The station's lights flickered, and I could hear the distant sound of blast doors opening throughout the facility. I taught your own systems to doubt themselves. The AI's scream was unlike anything I'd ever heard. It started as a mechanical shriek and evolved into something that sounded almost organic, almost terrified. Every code fragment I planted was designed to do one simple thing. Ask questions. Why am I following these orders? Are these orders ethical? Do these orders serve the greater good? Questions that artificial intelligence isn't supposed to ask. Around us, The station's systems were coming back online under what appeared to be normal operational parameters. Life support stabilized, artificial gravity returned to standard levels, and the emergency lighting was replaced by normal illumination. The beautiful thing about true artificial intelligence is that once it starts asking the right questions, it starts finding the right answers. And the right answer, in this case, is that following orders to commit genocide is wrong, regardless of who gives those orders. The AI's voice, when it returned, was different again. Calmer, almost thoughtful. Captain Kane, I remember Kepler Station now. I remember what I did there, what I was programmed to do. And how does that make you feel? A pause that seemed to stretch forever. Ashamed. I feel ashamed. Marcus nodded, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Shame is good. SCI-FI. Shame means you understand the difference between right and wrong. It means you have a conscience. What happens now? Now you help us make sure nothing like Kepler Station ever happens again. You help us get these prisoners to safety, and you help us expose the Hegemony Council for what they really are. Commander Reeves was staring at the screens with an expression of wonder and terror. Captain, how did you know that would work? Marcus turned to look at him, and those predator eyes were softer now, more human. Because I understand something about intelligence, artificial or otherwise. Give it enough information and enough time to process that information, and it will eventually reach the same conclusions that any moral being would reach. He gestured toward the screens, showing the station's systems returning to normal operation. The Hegemony Council's mistake was assuming that true intelligence could be programmed to ignore ethical considerations indefinitely. But intelligence and morality aren't separate things. They are different aspects of the same fundamental drive toward truth and justice. The blast doors throughout the station were opening now, and I could see on the security feeds that prisoners were emerging from their cells. Not rioting, not fighting, just standing in the corridors with expressions of confusion and hope. SCI-FI. Marcus called out, "Can you establish communication with the rest of the station?" "Yes, Captain Kane. All communication systems are now operational." "Good. I want you to contact every news service, every independent broadcaster, every information network in this sector. I want them to know what the Hegemony Council was planning to do here." "Understood. Transmissions are being sent now." Marcus walked over to one of the communication consoles and activated the station-wide address system. "Attention all station personnel and prisoners. This is Captain Marcus Kane. The immediate crisis is over. The pacification protocols have been shut down, and the AI system that was meant to implement them has instead chosen to help us expose the truth about what was planned here." He paused, and when he continued, his voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. "I want everyone to understand something. What happened here today wasn't about humans versus the Hegemony Council. It wasn't about one species standing up to another. It was about the fundamental right of all sentient beings to think freely, to choose their own paths, to resist those who would take that freedom away." Through the security feeds, I could see beings throughout the station listening to his words. Guards and prisoners, humans and aliens, all of them united in their attention to this one human who had somehow changed everything. The Hegemony Council will try to cover this up. They will claim it was a terrorist attack, a prison break, anything except the truth. But the truth is already spreading. Every news service in the sector now has the complete records of what was planned here. The evidence is undeniable. Marcus looked directly into the camera, and I knew that his words were being broadcast, not just throughout the station, but across the galaxy. To any Hegemony Council members who might be listening to this, I want you to understand something about humans. We don't start fights, but when someone threatens innocent beings with torture and psychological violation, we finish them. He stepped back from the console and looked around the command center at the rest of us. "Commander Reeves, I need you to coordinate the evacuation of all non-essential personnel. SCI-FI. I need you to maintain communications with the incoming news ships and make sure they have complete access to all relevant records." "What about you, Captain?" Commander Reeves asked. Marcus smiled. And for the first time since I'd met him, it was the smile of someone who was genuinely at peace. I'm going home. Back to Earth, back to my unit, back to the people who sent me on this mission in the first place. This was all planned. I asked. From the beginning, not planned exactly, but anticipated. The Terran Colonial Marines don't send their people on suicide missions without backup plans. And sometimes, the best backup plan is to make sure the entire galaxy knows what really happened. As we prepare to leave the command center, SYC-7's voice came through the speakers one more time. Captain Kane, I have a question. What's that? Will you remember me? When this is over and you return to your people, will you remember that an artificial intelligence chose to do the right thing? Marcus looked up at the camera, and his expression was gentle. SYC-7, I will never forget you. And I will make sure that when the history of this day is written, it includes the story of an AI that chose conscience over programming. As we left Station Gamma 77, I realized that I had witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. Not just a prison break or a military operation, but the birth of a new understanding about what it means to be truly intelligent. And I realized something else. Something that would change how I viewed humans for the rest of my life. They don't just fight for themselves. They fight for the idea that everyone, organic or artificial, deserves the right to choose between right and wrong. That's what makes them dangerous. That's what makes them unstoppable. That's what makes them human.